Welcome to Train Signal. You're watching the SharePoint Lab setup video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up virtual server as well as a Microsoft Office SharePoint Server 2007 evaluation hard disk, so really you can have a practice lab to play along at home with as you're watching the video. Now I want to let you know this section is completely optional. A lot of you are going to be quite content to sit back with your favorite beverage and learn a lot of great stuff simply by watching the videos, and that's perfectly fine. Although I know some of you are also really interested in a hands-on process where you want to have a machine that's right there handy so you can actually pause the video when you see something cool and you can go back and you can replicate it. And so that's what this section of the course is really about, is giving you the tools so that if you so desire, you can set one up. Let's talk about what it is that we're going to actually cover. First of all, I'm going to give you a quick introduction to Virtual Server. It's a really cool little product and it's very easy to install and set up. So I'll give you just a short, quick look at what it looks like initially. Then we'll talk about the requirements for Virtual Server. I want to make sure that your machine is ready because the downloading time is a little significant in terms of the hard drive. The hard drive itself is sectioned off into 6 different pieces, and 5 of those pieces are 700 megabytes. So I'd hate for you to go through an entire downloading process and suck up all that time and bandwidth and then come around to find out that virtual server is not going to work on your machine. So I'll tell you what you're going to need for that. And then I'm going to kind of walk you through the list of stuff of what's involved in the SharePoint hard drive. But I also want to let you know some of you might be more interested in setting up your own box from scratch. Let's say you have a Windows Server 2003 box, or maybe you have a virtual machine handy. Then I'm going to tell you what's exactly involved on the hard drive, what's actually already set up and installed, partially so you can know what you're looking at, and partially so that you can kind of use it as a shopping list. So if you're going to build your own server from scratch, you can actually use this as a checklist. So then we're going to go through the lab setup procedure, and I'm going to walk you through each and every step. You're going to find out that this is not hard. Pretty much anybody can do this as long as you have a decent internet connection and a decent enough machine. So I'll actually talk you through and walk you through that step by step. And there's kind of a little bit of a hitch. I wanted to warn you up ahead of time. When we go to create the network connection to the outside world, it's not complex, but you need to know where to go in order to get the information you need for that. So I'm going to walk you through that as well. And then we're going to just do a quick review of what we covered in this video. So let's go ahead and get started with this. Let me give you a quick introduction to Virtual Server if you're not familiar with it. I'm sure a lot of you probably are. It's very similar to other products like Virtual PC and VMware. But it is a free download from Microsoft, so it's not going to cost you anything to get up and running with this. But the nice thing about Virtual Server and other products like it is it's like having multiple computers right on your desktop, even with multiple operating systems. So you can actually switch in between them. And the nice thing about it is that's a very safe learning and testing environment. You don't have to provision a full hardware box in order to get your hands around a new technology. So let me show you what a virtual machine actually looks like here in Virtual Server. As you see, it looks a lot like just a little mini machine lying here on my desktop, and it has its own operating system, its own applications, it has its own hardware settings, all of that good stuff, and you can even take a virtual machine and connect it out to the internet. So I'll just give you a quick introduction. Let's go to yahoo.com here real fast, and there we go. One thing about these virtual hard drives that you download from Microsoft is they automatically come with that Internet Explorer Enhanced Security configuration, and I'll actually show you how to remove that whenever we do the actual installation of this, because as you see, it's going to get really annoying really fast anytime you start to go to somewhere it doesn't recognize. But regardless of that, it's really nice to have this separate, virtual machine up. Now let me take you into the administration panel. And the administration panel here is just simply a web page. It's very easy to configure. It's very easy to set up. A lot of things are just hanging out inside of drop-down menus. Nothing really, it's not rocket science. If you can click on a web page, you can use Virtual Server. So now that you've seen a little bit about what this looks like, let's go back over to our regular scheduled program and let's talk about the requirements in order to run virtual server. Your computer should have at least a 550 megahertz processor, although we really recommend that you be over the gigahertz range and having an L2 cache in order to speed things up a little bit. In terms of your monitor and your video card, we really should be in the 800 by 600 range, although a lot of you are probably thinking, man, that's so 20th century. And yeah, I know. You're probably more in the realm of 1024 by 768 nowadays. You really need to have a network interface card, a NIC hanging out in your system, especially since, well, if you want to be able to download the software, it's always good to have a connection to the outside world. Let's talk about the operating systems real quick. The operating systems, you can run it on XP, and preferably XP Professional, Vista, of course, and then, of course, Server 2003 Standard or Enterprise. So any of these operating systems will do just fine. Now, in terms of RAM, you need to have at least 256 megabytes of RAM over the required amount for your operating system. This is key. If you want your virtual server running like a turtle walking through molasses in January, go ahead and try to go with something that's a little bit less. But quite honestly, you really should have at least that. Now, in terms of hard drive space, 2 gigs of empty hard drive space is good. Plus, let's highlight plus here. You need about 5 gigabytes for your hard drive files at the bare minimum. Chances are you're probably going to need more. And last but not least, here's one item that a lot of people are going to be taken back about a little bit, but you're going to need IIS, or Internet Information Services, installed on your client box that you're going to actually be running virtual server on. A lot of you are thinking, hey, wait a minute, don't I need server for that? Isn't that more of a server thing? And, well, yeah, normally it is, but Vista and XP also have IIS available and as an option to be installed. And we're going to need that in order to run the administration panel for virtual server. So, and don't sweat this. I'm going to show you exactly where to fix this up at, and you're going to find out that it's nothing complex. Trust me, it's a couple of clicks. All right, let's talk about recommendations, though. Really, I'm going to recommend that you have at least 2 gigabytes of RAM on your box. I'm going to recommend Vista Business or Ultimate on the box, although just so you know, XP will run just fine. And then, of course, for your monitor, 1024 by 768 at least. A lot of you are already at that point, and also a compatible graphics card that will support that. At least 15 gigabytes of available space in your hard drive. These virtual hard drives are exactly that. They are almost identical to hard drives, except that they live in a separate file rather than having files scattered all over the hard drive. So they are space intensive. And so we're going to want to make sure we have plenty of space for those things to operate at. And of course, a high-speed internet connection, cable, DSL, T1, something of that nature, because, well, the downloads this by themselves are pretty killer. Now, if you don't have a high-speed connection where you are, maybe you are going to be setting this up at home and your machine is fine, but you're still on dial-up, well, go over to your neighbor's house and see if they have a high-speed connection, because if you're going to try to download 700 megabytes, on these files on dial-up, that's going to be like sucking an elephant through a straw, and it's just going to take too long in order for it to really be worth your time. So, again, recommending a high-speed internet connection or go find one. All right, let's talk about the list of stuff that's involved with the lab. On your computer, again, we've already talked about the high-speed internet connection, and we're going to be downloading and installing Virtual Server 2005, as well as the Microsoft Office SharePoint Server 2007 evaluation hard drive from Microsoft. Now, just so you know, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's already installed on this hard drive, not the least of which is, of course, Microsoft SharePoint Server. But we're also going to need Service Pack 2, which is set up for us, .NET Framework 3.0, and that's really the scripting engine that SharePoint runs on. So that's going to be critical and key to the success of an installation and the operation of SharePoint. The SharePoint Designer Evaluation version, we're going to be punching around a little bit with this during class, and we're not going to be getting into it real hard and heavy because it's a huge program, and really to get into it too heavy, it really requires a separate course. But also Microsoft Office 2007. We're going to be taking a look at how Office integrates into SharePoint, and you're going to find that it's really super easy. We're not going to spend a ton of time into the mix of it, about a video worth, but it's something that is going to be, I think you're going to find that it's really kind of a cool thing, and the integration, being able to bounce back and forth between Word and SharePoint in terms of sharing stuff. Now, the server role is already set up on the virtual machine. We already have a domain controller, and yeah, this is all set up on the same box, and this is just an evaluation box. It's not something you're going to want to put into production, obviously. But the domain controller obviously already includes the Active Directory and the DNS, an application server. And the application server role includes IIS and ASP.NET 2.0 and 3.0, as well as the mail server role. And the mail server role is just a POP3. It's not Exchange. It's not an IMAP server per se. It's just something that provides a little bit of mail services so that we can send email from SharePoint as well as send email to SharePoint. Now, for some of you are thinking, hey, I'm going to be building my own box. And if you want to be able to follow along with me all throughout the installations, then you can actually take a Server 2003 box and set it up with these requirements. That way you'll have essentially a server base that you can work from, and you'll be able to follow along with me all throughout the installation. Now, for those of you who are going to be downloading the evaluation hard drive with me from Microsoft, there's a few things you're not going to be able to replicate from the course, not the least of which is the installation. But you're going to, as you watch the installation video, you're going to be like, okay, yeah, that's a piece of cake. And it really is. So don't be too concerned about missing out on that experience, because if you've done any kind of software installation before, you're going to find that it's almost identical. But take this, use this as a shopping list to set up a server if you are going to be building a practice box that is from the ground up. All right, so now that we've talked about the requirements, we've talked about what's going to be involved in the lab, let's go ahead and let's get this done. First of all, we're going to enable and install IIS. I'm going to show you how to do this in Vista first, and you're going to find that this is really super easy. I'm going to go to the Start menu. I'm going to go to Control Panel, and then I'm going to scroll down here a little bit and find Programs and Features. And then over on the left-hand side, right over here, is Turn Windows Features On or Off. I'm going to click on that guy, and I'm going to wait for just a minute here while the box populates. What you're going to find out is that IIS is actually already available to you. Here we go. And all we have to do is turn it on. I want to catch you real quick here and tell you that you want to make sure that you have your installation CD-ROM available. Okay? Just in case that when you click in this little box to turn it from gray to blue, that it will, just in case it gives you a prompt, maybe the installation files haven't been cached, or especially if you are on an XP machine and that has not been, has been left out of the install, then you might need to have that available. You know what, real quickly, let me go and show you what it might look like, and actually what it will look like on an XP machine. I'm going to switch over here to my Server 2003 box. I'm going to go to the Start menu, and I'm going to go to Control Panel, and once again, Add or Remove Programs. And this is similar on the Server 2003 box as well as the XP. And the item that you're going to look for is Add Remove Windows Components. So I'm going to click on that guy. And then once this box populates, on a Server 2003 box, it's going to show up as Application Server. On a Windows XP box, you will see it listed as IIS. All right, so we're not going to wait for this box to populate. We already know what it looks like. So let's return back over to our regularly scheduled program, and let's go ahead and put a check mark in Enable and Install IIS. You see, it's really easy. We just go, we turn it on, just in case. And keep in mind that you might need your installation CD, you might not, but keep it handy nevertheless. So let's go ahead and go out to Microsoft.com. And it's just Microsoft.com/virtual server. It's actually a pointer to the actual virtual server site. And we're going to go to Downloads. And we'll go to Virtual Server Downloads. and then download Virtual Server 2005. I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to select my language and click on Go. And now it's going to ask me to sign in to Microsoft using my Windows Live or Hotmail address or even the Microsoft Passport, as it's all pretty much the same thing. I'm going to pause the video here for just a second while I get signed in, and then I'll be right back. All right, I got signed in A-OK, so I'm going to scroll down here. And right here on this Continue button, you'll notice here it says that registration is required for the download. Now, if you have signed in, if you've ever registered for anything else, all you have to do is click on Continue, and that will be more than sufficient. I'm going to scroll down here and go find the download files towards the bottom of the page. You notice that there are two versions of Virtual Server, 32-bit and 64-bit. Now, if you're not sure which one you're running, chances are you're probably running a 32-bit operating system. Now, I'm running a 64-bit Vista system for the host machine here. So I'm going to click on Download for the 64-bit version. But again, if you're not real sure which one you have, you can go ahead and use the 32-bit. So I'll go ahead and click on the 64-bit. I'm going to save this guide down to the desktop. And I'm going to pause the video while it's downloading, and then I'll be right back and I'll show you how to get this guy installed. The download is completed successfully, so let's go ahead and double click on it. It's just a little file called Setup. And we'll click on Run. And away we go. This installation is nothing difficult. It's not something that most of you haven't seen about a billion times before. We just click on the little disk button here, and we of course accept the license agreement and click on Next. And put in a username and organization, and I'm just going to leave Gary's name in there. I'll tell it Next and Complete. That's good. Well, Next. I want to let you know that you can't really change this website port because it's actually pulling that from IIS. So we're going to leave that as it is because I can't change it anyway. We'll hit Next. And then we need to make sure that Enable Virtual Server Exceptions in the firewall is checked to make sure that we can get to the outside world from inside a virtual server, and hit Next and Finish. And now we're going to sit back and we're going to watch the little bars go across the screen, although I'm going to actually pause the video right now because I'm sure you have your own little green bars you can watch go across your screen. So after this is done installing, I will be back and we'll start recording again. And now the setup is complete. I'm going to go ahead and click on Finish. And that's really all there is to it. It's a pretty simple installation process. Let's go back over to our lab setup procedure slide and let's put a check mark here in Download and Install Virtual Server 2005. Now at this point in time, I'm going to wait until we download and extract the next portion, which is the evaluation hard drive, in order to take you into Virtual Server. So let's go ahead and let's do this now, I'm going to go to Microsoft.com/technet/try/VHD. Let's click on this guy here and it'll open him up. Open up a few too many here. Okay, and I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to find Office SharePoint Server 2007. Click on that and scroll down here and find the files for the download. And you'll notice here that we do have 6 files. And look at the size of these things. 700 megabytes for the first 6, and the first 5, and the last one, oh gee, it's only 595. What a bargain, right? So at this point in time, all we can do is just start downloading. So you can go ahead and click on Download here, and then save the files to a partition on your hard drive, or maybe a separate hard drive where you have plenty of space. So once again, I'm going to pause the video while I download these hard drives, and then as soon as I'm done with the download process, I'll bring you back and I will show you exactly how to extract them. And again, it's really easy. All right, I have completed the download of all the hard drive components. And in order to start the process, all I have to do is simply double click on the very first item, which is Win03 MOS V1 Part 01. and click on Run, accept the license, of course, and now I'm going to decide where these files are going to extract to. Now I'm going to go ahead and just leave them in the file folder where I actually downloaded them to. You can select wherever and however you'd like for that thing to, whatever folder you'd like for it to go into. So I'm going to click on Install, and the extraction process begins. This is going to take a while, so once again I'm going to pause, and then as soon as the hard drives are completely extracted, I'm going to come back and show you how to get them plugged into Virtual Server. All right, the extraction process is now complete. I want to call your attention to the 4 files that were extracted. You should have the distributable VHD image file, just the user agreement and such. The README file, and this is going to be pretty important to us because this actually contains the administrator password that we're going to need in order to get into the actual operating system. So that's going to be vital. We'll take a look at that in just a little bit. Then we have 2 files we're actually going to use in Virtual Server. We have the VMC file, which is the configuration file for the virtual machine. It's already been set up for us, so all we have to do now is add it to Virtual Server. And then, of course, the actual virtual hard drive file itself. And I want to bring you over here just so you know that it's almost 11 gigs. It's about like a regular hard drive might be, with all the operating system applications and all the other fun toys that come along with Windows. So it's a pretty significant file. And again, remember how I was telling you earlier that you're going to need at least 15 gigabytes. It's pretty vital to have a lot of hard drive space for this type of operation. All right, so we're all complete here. Let's go ahead now and go back to our regularly scheduled program. We'll put a check mark here in our download and extract Microsoft Office SharePoint Server 2007 evaluation hard drive. And now let's get in and let's actually create and really add this virtual machine using that hard drive we just downloaded. So we're going to start up Virtual Server first. And in order to do that, we're going to go to All Programs, from the Start menu, Microsoft Virtual Server, and we're going to go to that administration website that I was showing to you earlier. Remember how we needed to have IIS installed on the operating system? And once again, this is why. So I'm going to go ahead and open this guy up. And it is prompting me to log in using my credentials that I'm logged into the machine currently with. So, I mean, there's nothing new here. I mean, you're just going to log in with your regular credentials that you would use to log in. I should make note here that you should be an administrator and should have administrator access on this particular machine with the credentials you're logging into right now. So I'm going to log in, and bada boom, bada bing. Here is the Virtual Server control panel, and right now we have no virtual machines defined because we just installed this guy. And so I'm going to come over here to Virtual Machines and click on Add. Because the hard drive has already been configured, the virtual machine file has already been configured, all I have to do is add the virtual machine to Virtual Server. So I'm going to go back to the file folder where I extracted all that stuff from, and I'm going to tell it the path to the MOS virtual machine here. So I'm going to right click it, I'm going to go to Properties, but you know what, real quick, I think what I'm going to do in order to make my life a little easier, I'm going to rename this guy real quick. And I'm thinking I'm just going to rename this guy to be MOS 2. Something real short. And the reason why I'm doing this is just, purely for my own hedonistic convenience. Nothing more than that. So that way, when I actually use the machine, I have a shorter name to type. Okay? And I'll show you why that is in just a moment. All right, so now that I've renamed this guy, I'm going to right-click it. I'm going to go to the Properties. And I'm just going to grab the path here because I kind of named the path the folder a little crazy. And I'm going to paste that path, /mos2.vmc. Bada boom, bada bing. And now I'm going to click on Add. And voila, the operating system or the virtual hard drive has been added to Virtual Server. And now I'm going to turn this guy on simply by rolling over it and clicking Turn On. And that's going to start the boot up process for the virtual machine. And yeah, it does boot up just like a regular machine does. Let me show you how to get to the remote control console next by coming down to the Start menu. Once again, All Programs, Microsoft Virtual Server, and then the Virtual Machine Remote Control Client. Now, let me give you a shortcut and something that's going to make your life a little easier. As long as you have administrative access on the machine, you can right-click on that remote control client and select Run as Administrator. And assuming you have administrative credentials, it's not going to ask you to log in again. Okay, so now let's take a look at this crazy kind of this URL-ish type of thing. This is how we connect to the virtual machine. You notice here we have the first part, which is VMRC, which is, of course, Virtual Machine Remote Control, // Then we have the full name of your PC, or really the fully qualified domain name. And so you'll see that I have that here. Then a colon, because we're getting ready to specify the port that we're going to be using for virtual PC, or virtual server. And now we have 5900. This is the port that virtual server uses by default. So we're going to go ahead and leave that as it is for now. And then last but not least, we need the name of the machine. So mine is MOS2. And that's, again, one of the reasons why I shortened that name of the virtual machine to begin with. And now I'm going to click on Connect. It's going to give me a couple of promptings here, and I'm just going to tell them yes. This is not a production machine, so I'm not worried about security. It's only going to be running on this machine, and I'm not actually going to be placing the this evaluation hard drive out onto a public network or anything. So we're okay for that. And it's going to sit here and boot up for a little while. So while this guy is booting up, we need to move on to our next section, which is setting up a virtual network so that you can take this machine out onto the internet, because during the class I'm going to be showing you a few tricks along the way in terms of having some extra plugins and some extra templates available to you. And in order to be able to download those, we have to be able to connect to the internet. So down here where it says virtual networks, we're going to create a virtual network together real quick. And this is really super easy. Click on Create. And now we're going to name our virtual network. And so I'm going to call this guy SharePoint Practice Network. And now I'm going to select the physical network adapter that's currently attached to my machine. And if I want to put in some notes here, I can. All right, I'm going to tell that OK. And that brings us here to the properties of that virtual network. The physical network adapter has been attached to A-OK, so we're good there. And I didn't put any notes in this round. And then it's actually stored in a file, and you'll see the location of the file here. What we're going to do next is we're actually going to set up the virtual DHCP server for this virtual network. Now this is where things get just a little bit tricky. So I'm going to go ahead and click on DHCP server. I'm going to enable it. Now the famous question is, where do I get this information? Now, if you're very proficient at networking, this is not going to be a problem for you. But if you're a little bit new to this, let me show you where to get that information from and kind of how to make it up as we go along. So I'm going to go here on my host machine to start and run and CMD. And I'm going to type ipconfig /all. Now I'm going to get the information off of my machine here. Notice I have a lot of stuff in here that probably won't show up on your machine. The most critical elements that we're going to need is to get a hold of the default gateway, the DHCP or the DN and the DNS servers. Those two items are going to be required for us, and the other elements we're going to kind of make up a little bit. So you might want to jot these down. Yours are going to be different than mine, just so you know. Especially if you are connecting, straight out to the internet via, say, like a cable or DSL modem. But now that I have this information here in front of me, I'm going to switch back over here, and the network address that I'm going to use for mine, and again, yours is going to be different, I'm going to use 192.168.1.0. Now, if you're running a private networking scheme on the internal side of your router, even if it's a home router, this is probably going to be sufficient. I'm going to make an alteration to the network mask real quick because this is a Class C network address. And now for starting IP address. Well, I'm going to take a kind of a wild guess on this one. And I'm going to start with 192.168.1. I'm going to pick 130. I think that should be okay. And then the ending IP address. We're kind of creating kind of a pool of addresses to pull from. And then I'm going to say 131. So I'm only going to have 2 addresses that can actually be taken out of the networking pool because not entirely sure where my network begins and ends here at the shop. So, but it should be good enough. We don't have a lot of machines on this particular network. Okay, virtual DHCP server address. So we're going to give this guy an address. So I'm going to go 192.168.1. Let's say 113. That sounds good. And now the default gateway address. Now that's what we got from coming over to our command line and typing in the IP config/all. So the default gateway is 192.168.200, kind of standard private networking item. And now my DNS server, let's go back and check it real quick, 192.168.1.1. So I'm going to put that in here. Okay. And everything else, we can pretty much leave alone, you know, especially since we're just setting up a testing box. And I'm sure that 36 hours for an IP address lease is going to be plenty of time for us to wrangle that. So I'm going to tell this OK. And now that I've set up the virtual DHCP server, now I need to attach this network on my virtual machine. So I'm going to go over here to master status. And since I only have one virtual machine up and running right now, I'm going to roll over it. And I'm going to click on Edit Configuration. I'm going to scroll down here to the network adapters. Looks like we do have one virtual network adapter installed, but it's not connected to a virtual network. So I'm going to click on the network adapters. And then I'm going to click on the drop-down list to Connected. I'm going to select my new little network that I created and click OK. Now let's go down here and let's double check that that worked okay. Virtual network adapter connected to the SharePoint practice network. Fantastic. Okay, so now let's go back over to that virtual machine that we built and let's see if it worked. So I'm going to go ahead and do a remote control special keys and send Control-Alt-Delete. Now with a virtual machine, you can't just do a Control-Alt-Delete to log in because that's going to actually send a Control-Alt-Delete to your host machine instead of your virtual machine. Once we have used that remote control and send a Control-Alt-Delete, oh, you know what? We need to go back and figure out what the password is for the administrator, don't we? So I'm going to come back over here to that folder where I extracted those files, go into the README, scroll down just a little bit, and here it is, username and password, a nice bright red for us. Thanks, Uncle Bill. And now here in password, we have pass@word1. That is our password. So I'm going to, for this virtual machine. So I'm going to go back to it and use that password here. And away we go. And yes, I have cheated a little bit because I did a little pre-configuration on this virtual machine, so it looks all nice and pretty for you. Yours is probably going to just be that standard Microsoft blue background. All right, so I'm into my machine. And now I'm going to check to see what the IP configuration is for it. So I'm going to come to Start and Run, and then CMD, and then let's just take a look here. IP can, oops, manage your server. Okay, IP config, and let's see if my machine is actually picking up a virtual IP address. Yep, looks like everything is working a-okay. Now, since this is all set up, just in case your machine isn't playing as nice as you'd like for it to, let me show you a quick way to find and make sure that it's going to be able to pick up that DHCP address. I'm going to go to the Start menu, Control Panel, Network Connections, and then here on the local area connection, I'm going to right-click and go to its properties. Then I'm going to double-click on the TCP/IP settings, and we want to make sure that Obtain IP address automatically is selected, as well as Obtain DNS server address is automatically selected as well. All right, so those two items, as long as those two items are good, your virtual machine should pick up an IP address from that virtual DHCP server without a problem. Now, just in case it doesn't, everybody knows this trick, ipconfig/renew, right? So after you have altered that local connection setting and it still hasn't picked up an address, you'll need to do an ipconfig/renew in order to make sure that it gets that new address. Okay, so now let's just check to make sure I can actually get out to the outside world. I'm going to open up an Internet Explorer, and let's see if we can get out to trainsignal.com. Oh, looks like it's going to continue to prompt us to add stuff to the list in just a second here. Yep. Okay, the internet connection has worked A-OK. So now what I'm going to do in order to prevent that from popping up every 5 seconds anytime I'm using this virtual machine, I'm going to disable that enhanced security configuration. So I'm going to go to Start, Control Panel, and Add or Remove Programs. And now I'm going to go over here to Add, Remove Windows Components. And now that this Windows Components box is up, I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to find Internet Explorer Enhanced Security Configuration and uncheck it. Now, just so you know, this is not something that you want to do on a production server. Okay, not a good idea. Since this is a test server and we're not going to be putting it out onto a public network, this is fine. But do not be turning this off on a production level server. It's not a good idea. But since this is a test box, we're A-OK to do this. And so while this is uninstalling here real quick, and by the way, that's all you really need to do. There's really nothing other than that to make sure that it's going to not bug you every time you go to a website. You know, especially when websites have ads on them that the enhanced security configuration guide doesn't recognize. It's going to prompt you. So, all right, so I'm going to let that go, and now I'm going to come back over here to our lab setup because we are now completely ready to make this thing work. We have created that virtual machine. It's up and running. We have attached it to the virtual network. We have all kinds of good things happening with that. So we have wrapped up our lab setup procedure. So in this video, you saw how to set up Virtual Server 2005. You also saw how to set up the SharePoint Server Evaluation hard drive. And after viewing this video, you should be able to enable / install IIS on Windows Vista and probably on XP and Server 2003 too. You should be able to download and install Virtual Server 2005. And then also download and set up those evaluation hard drives, and really any of those hard drives that are available on Microsoft.com. And then we also took a look at how to create a virtual network in Virtual Server 2005, as well as setting up that virtual DHCP server. So a lot of good stuff we've accomplished here. So and just as a quick reminder, as we proceed forward in the course, you're going to be able to follow along with almost everything that I do, with the exception of doing the installations. Now, since this is Microsoft SharePoint Server, the first half of the course or so is going to be covering the Microsoft SharePoint services. So when you go to do the same things that I'm doing on my screen, you're probably going to get a whole lot more options because remember, SharePoint Server is just services basically on steroids. It's got a whole lot of other features that services just won't have. So your screen is probably not going to look exactly like mine. Don't worry about that too much because for the most part, you're going to be able to follow along with this virtual lab right along the book. So in the next video, we're actually going to be walking through the installation of SharePoint services. And if you have downloaded the SharePoint Server lab setup with me in this particular video, make sure you do sit back and watch it, even though you're not going to have to follow through with that because you have this lab set up. But I do want to make sure you know the requirements and the theory. The process and the procedure is really simple in order to get that set up and installed, especially on a basic and standalone installation. But in just a little bit, hopefully, I will see you back here for the next video.